find it funny how you use an accuse of avoiding a point. To avoid a point. I showed you examples of congregational prayer. When I ask if you accept, you don't answer at all. You just accuse me of avoiding your points, which I just told you will be covered in the point I'm making. Very clever of you, but still, about that congregational prayer. I just showed you the passages. You don't have anything to say except to reject. Which is it? And blah, blah, blah. Anything to avoid talking about the idol used as effective snake bite medicine, or what, quote, atonement for sin, unquote, means, using shed blood of innocent animals, or the Passover lamb. Anything to keep from talking about things that make absolutely no sense if God didn't send his son to die for the sins of the human race, huh? No response. He doesn't respond. See, when I hear, quote, and bring them back to the land which you gave to their father, or father, it's the fathers or fathers, it makes me think they aren't in their land. And when they, the Jews or Israelis, aren't in their land, that makes me think they aren't near the Holy of Holies, the temple, where the sacrifices are to take place. So I can see why they pray toward it. But is it 5 times a day? Data seems missing. But verse 34 is only as related to verse 33. It says specifically, quote, when they are in the land of their enemies. It's just one scenario given. You ignore verse 35, unquote. When there is not rain because they have sinned, unquote. Neither is that's not in a foreign land, is it? No. Verse 37, quote, when there's a famine, unquote, neither is that predicted upon being in a foreign land, nor is 28 through 30. It's clear that it applies everywhere. More coming next. No, since the temple contained, quote, the Holy of Holies, where blood sacrifices were taking place, and being that the, quote, Holy of Holies seemed to represent God on earth in a big way, it makes perfect sense to me now that the Jews, well, Israelis, would be praying toward the temple. But again, why the bloody sacrifices of innocent animals taking place for atonement? Atonement for what? Why the idol used as effective snake bite medicine? Why the spotless lamb for the Passover to keep the firstborn of Israel from dying? How much you want to bet that if there was that spotless lamb blood over the doorways of the Egyptians, the firstborn Egyptians wouldn't die? Also, you seem to be implying that it only applies to the Jews, which is not the case. See verse 41 to 43. In verse 43, it says, he has come to there from far away. So it clearly applies in the land as well, not from outside it, away from the temple. Also, it's verse 47, not 33, which is the only verse that mentions captivity as a scenario. The rest give others that do not include captivity. So, do you accept it that it's not just in captivity, but in all situations? Again, since the Holy of Holies, since the temple contained the Holy of Holies, or that most holy place, where blood sacrifices of innocent animals taking place for atonement, it makes perfect sense to me now that they'd be facing or praying toward the temple, since the, quote, Holy of Holies seems to have represented God being on earth. I mean, you talk about the Kaaba being Allah's house. Man, the Kaaba never saw the day. But why the bloody sacrifices for atonement? Atonement for what? And why the idol? Oh, why the snake idol and Passover lamb in Egypt? He doesn't respond. So you are trying to make it seem as if there was only there was only one, that it was, if this, you're trying to make it seem as if this was only when in captivity. That is clearly not the case at all. Do you accept that? Do you accept that you are mistaken? It's just one of the scenarios given. Also, don't be mistaken. Those aren't the only instances, only examples. It will work for any supplication by anyone. See verses 38 and 39. So I ask again, in the light of this, do you accept that point? Since the Holy of Holies inside the temple, the most holy place, represented God being on earth, I'm not 100% certain of that fact, but I'm guessing. It seems that praying toward the temple in some form of fashion would make complete sense. But you seem to be avoiding the reality that there were blood sacrifices of innocent animals taking place in the Holy of Holies that they prayed toward. How come? How can you keep on avoiding that fact? So you can say it isn't just in the land of captivity. He totally ignores it. Just goes to this place, and so you can see it isn't just in the land of captivity, and also that isn't just a one-time thing, but for all kinds of situations. And as verse 38 and 39 say, for anything and everything, quote, whatever prayer, whatever supplication, unquote. So I feel that these have been well established. However, I will await until you are ready to accept before moving on to the next point. Again, you have convinced me that they pray toward the temple. How many times a day, or a year, or whatever isn't clear, but they, did pray toward it at least once. And the question I have is, why were there sacrifices of innocent animals taking place inside the place they were facing? It was for atonement, but atonement for what? And why the idol of a snake, used as effective snake bite medicine, held up by Moses? And why the Passover spotless lamb if Christianity is false? That wasn't the point I was asserting. Of course not. I know that was established. The point I was addressed was one. You asked if it was only for the Jews when in captivity. The answer is not for it's anyone, anywhere. So, you asked if it was a time deal, and no, it wasn't. How do you know? That is the point I was taking. Asking if you accepted. You sort of sidetracked me from point 2. You accepted point 1, but tried to limit its scope and supplication. I just contended this. That is why I was asking if you accepted. Again, what was the idol of the snake being used successfully as snake bite medicine? Spotless lamb blood of the Passover lamb over doorways, the bloody sacrifices of innocent animals for atonement. Atonement for what? What does atonement mean to you? What does Holy of Holies mean to you, or the most holy place? I'm not ignoring it. I'm not ignoring it. We are just only on point 2. If you would be patient, shall I give you the outline? We are talking about methods of forgiveness in the Bible and are on the first 8, which we are on now. Prayer, your questions were: 1, do they pray toward a place? 2, do they do it for forgiveness? 3, was prostration a custom? 4, the frequency which it was done. Then we'll move on to other methods. Repentance, charity, turning from sin. And then we'll go over why, if these are options, when that has been established, a sacrifice is done, that's cool with you? Not ignoring, huh? When have you ever explained the symbolism of the spotless Passover lamb blood, or the idol of a snake being used successfully as snake-bite medicine, or bloody sacrifices of rams and goats and birds in the temple for atonement. Atonement for what? Again, how come you ignore all that stuff that seems to point to Jesus' death for the atonement of the world? How come?